Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we'll explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. And welcome back, everybody, for another amazing episode of Off the Comma. And as is always the case, I'm excited. I need to find a new word, Brigitte, but I'm going to stay with the one that works, is tried and true. I'm excited to have someone who has newly entered my circle. Every week, every month, every year, the universe keeps bringing new people onto my path. And so I'm excited to be talking to Brigitte because I've only started to get to know her, and she's only started to show some of the ways that her light is going to shine on my path. And so today I'm going to get to learn more about Brigitte and really kind of deepen my knowing of you, and I think further this relationship that we're probably going to have for a long time to come. Yeah. So I'm going to shut up now. And Brigitte, I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell us who you are and how would you like to be known?
Okay, well, thank you for having me. First of all, I am excited to be here. I'm ecstatic to be here, thrilled, because I love to chat and you love to chat. So this is going to be great. Well, you and I met because I do human design readings and I teach human design and I coach human design, and it came into your life and you fell into my path, which was so cool. I enjoyed meeting you. How would I like to be known? Wow. That's a good one. That's a deep one. But I think the word that describes me the best is someone who is super curious. I notice when I write anything or, cut a video or something, I fall into this pattern of asking a lot of questions to get people to think rather than me writing at them. And I notice I do that even when I'm speaking to people. Well, tell me more about that. Tell me more. And when I even am sharing this with you, I'm smiling really hard because I don't know what it is. I'm like a insatiable collector of information and useless trivia. So I love asking that. So I would say curious and determined. I learned that about myself looking back. Pretty determined. And I would say ultra sensitive too. Right? Kind of weird for a person who's sticking their nose into everybody's business, asking questions, right? To be sensitive. But yeah, that's how I think of myself. And I don't mind if people know that. Yeah.
Beautiful words. And I have to acknowledge you. And I was kind of chuckling because you're like, I don't know why, but I'm smiling because I'm curious. It's like, those are kind of like, that's like the snake eating its tail, right? Like it all belongs together, yes. Right? I don't know. Well, that's why you're curious. And I have to say how much I really appreciate you saying I am sensitive, and I don't mind telling people that, because so many of us, and I know we're going to get into your story, but so many of us, we'll apply these labels. We're doing that right now. I'm asking you to use some labels to describe yourself. And then there's all this stuff that comes with these labels. Well, this label's okay, but that one's not okay, and so on and so forth, whether it's by our standards or society standards. And sensitive is a label that typically does not come with a lot of favorable ratings or a lot of thumbs ups, right?
True.
And yet it is what it is. There is no positive or negative value to being sensitive. We're the ones who apply those values. And I, too, am a sensitive person who has started saying, you know what, I am that person and you deal with it, not me. So, right?
Oh, my God. Two thumbs up to that.
Back to
Excellent.
You. That's why I just self-referencing a little bit, but back to you. I love that. And cool. This is one of the reasons we get along. Brigitte, what else would you like people to know about you or this thing called human design that you've been introducing to us?
Well, that I could talk about forever because it's just a passion of mine. Human design is one of those, it falls into the category I would say people would think about a sort of a personality inventory, right? Like Myers-Briggs, people think about that and they get it. People of a certain age, I don't even know if they use that anymore, but yeah, it's like, tell me about
Mm.
me so I know how to fit into this job, this place, so forth, right? Human design, I call the woo-woo version of the Myers-Briggs test. And it is a combination of a bunch of philosophies, Western horoscope, Chinese I Ching, all kinds of things, the Kabbalah, you name it, all rung in
Mm.
there. And when you put your birth information, it spits out a chart and a diagram with some words and tells you exactly who you were born to be on this earth, who you were at the moment of birth. And
Mm.
that's your manual and path for life. But nobody knows that you have that. And you get kind of conditioned away from that and told not to be this, not to be that, when that's actually naturally who you are. So I just help people I guide people back to who they naturally are and make them really comfortable with it using the
Mm.
system that literally, I think, saved my life many years ago.
Nice. Okay. I love that. I certainly have my own experience with that, and definitely invite and encourage folks who are listening who find themselves being curious, as you described yourself, to start to look into it. It's called human design. It's easy to Google, or better yet, once you finish with this podcast, check out Brigitte's information in the show notes, because it should be your go-to source to learn more. So wonderful. Let's jump in. Let's get started. Before we get into the 5 questions, and I want to acknowledge, like, you haven't shared with me what your story is going to be about, so I'm really curious to learn and hear. But I do this with all of my guests before we get started. As you think about the conversation ahead, our next 45 minutes or so together, Brigitte, what intention would you have for yourself in this experience?
I'm just kind of curious to see where it takes me. Curious to see where this conversation goes.
Mm.
As I'm usually the one kind of guiding people to where they need to go. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of flows out of me and enjoy I just want to be surprised
Oh,
at the end, I think, to see what this ends up being.
okay. I love that.
And have fun too.
Okay.
I laugh a lot, so I want to have fun as we go along.
Wonderful. My intention is to support you in achieving your intention. And also, as it is always with this podcast, is that it creates a space where, in you just being free to share your experiences that we're going to be talking about, that someone who's listening to this, hopefully many someone's, will be able to relate to your story, see themselves in your story, be inspired by your story, and feel a little less alone, a little bit more connected, and potentially empowered to go and do something that they've been wanting to do. So let's create that space together.
That sounds great. Let's do it.
Let's dive in with the first question. So, Brigitte, where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
I'm going to say I didn't know I was sitting on a comma until you raised that metaphor. But when I look back now, I think it was maybe 25 years ago now, almost, when I left Canada and started doing travel nursing through the US. And I didn't know this at the time, but I was also about to leave the community of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. So I kind of climbed up on this comma by accident, I think. But I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and so around, so I think I've been sort of mentally out of it for a really long time, but still showing up. And it wasn't until I got a chance to kind of leave the environment and leave the influence of it,
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, yeah, I think I'm done with that. And didn't even really consider what was next.
Mm.
So that was like a hard pause, I would say, a hard stop.
It sounds like a big one too, because
Mm.
if I may, and please correct me where I reflect anything back that doesn't fit or is inaccurate. This was a big comma, it sounds like, because you said after 25 years, this was how you were raised. It sounds like it must have been a really large part of how you identified, as well as how you acted and behaved in life.
All of that. Yeah, it was
Mm.
huge. And not, I didn't think it out. It was just sort of like an impulse. I don't want to say it was like coming for a long time,
Hmm.
but it was like, okay, wow, the coast is clear. I'm just gonna, yeah, I'm out of there. I couldn't like take another minute, basically.
Mm.
And now that I was kind of fully on my own and not around anyone who had any input or judgment or, um, no fear around it to leave, basically, right? I was just, yeah, I don't have to tolerate this feeling of being stuck somewhere I don't want to be, stuck
Mm.
somewhere that literally makes me ill, emotionally, even physically,
Hmm.
and stuck being told what to do, told what to think. Like all of these things were just opposite to what I would want for anyone. Growing up as a child, I fell into this role of people coming to me, old and young, coming to me and sharing their issues and their problems within that organization, within our little group there, and me finding out ways to help them get through their problem with it and finding out ways to get around the system and get the finger to the man. I did that for everyone else but myself. I didn't realize, there wasn't anyone there to do it for me, but I was really good at kind of helping other people. So I had to actually leave
Yeah.
to help myself, as it
So
were.
I'd love to, if I may, step in because first of all, it's powerful, and there's so many things that come up. Like first and foremost, this last piece that you just shared, what came up for me visually is you're teaching people rebellion while you continue to stand in conformity.
Exactly. Perfectly
Until you
said.
left.
Perfectly
Until you left.
said. Oh my word.
um,
Yes.
and you said there's so much to share here and so much to unpack. I have so many questions, but you said it was a long time coming. And I'm wondering, what did you mean by that? Before we go on to this next question, which is going to allow you to build on this, but unpack that a little bit more. Why was it a long time coming?
I think since I was about 8 years old, I always had the intuition that that ain't right. That doesn't sound right. That behavior is not right. Why would you
Mm.
do that? So I always was kind of questioning it, even from a very, very young age. And then you're indoctrinated to believe that anybody who questions it is an apostate, like it is a terrible, terrible label. So then you don't do that out loud anymore,
Mm.
right? But I continue to do that. And then one of the things they discouraged as I was growing up was higher education. And that was a bit of a battle for my family, but I finagled the opportunity to go to college. I wanted to go to university, which is in Canada, there's kind of two different levels of school. So university is like
Mm.
considered very heady and it's going to take you you're going to start thinking for yourself, right? So I had to compromise and go to college. So I did that, but nobody knew that in college you get to pick your I forget what they called it at the time, but you have your core subjects and then you get to pick these like cool things you want to do, right?
Yeah,
So
we call them electives in the
thank you.
States, right?
That was the word.
Yeah.
That is actually the word. Yes, I forgot that. So there was a course called World Religions on it. So I jumped on that because I had learned a lot about religions, but in the context of when you knock on a door and you meet this person, this is what you say to them. This is what they believe, and this is how you say it. And these are the
Mm.
questions and the conversation stoppers you'll get. So we're trained really hardcore. But world
Mhm.
religions, I thought this should be fun. So yeah, I took it and I learned completely different perspective of the religions of the world. I learned what their core beliefs were, how they got there, what their people did, and a lot of it was just beautiful. And why not leave them alone with it? So I think right around that um, late teens or so, I literally was mentally not there anymore. Like I found myself
Mm.
knocking on doors, and I refused to talk about religion. We have a magazine there called The Awake and The Watchtower, and The Awake was more world events, and I would like talk about that because we can relate to that.
Mm.
So I started my own rebellion, I suppose, and nobody realized what I was doing, but I did. So
Mm.
they call that mentally physically in, mentally out. I didn't know it had a name until recently. So that's what I mean by a long time coming by the time I actually did physically leave.
Yeah. Well, and I hear so many things. You're in this environment that's very prescriptive and restrictive, and yet you're taking this information in, but there's something deep within you that there's a knowing, right? It wasn't, I didn't hear you describe, and correct me if I didn't, but this wasn't well, mom said do the religion, dad said don't do the religion. This was, my whole environment is prescribing for me things that inside me it doesn't work for.
Exactly.
And then that continued to grow and build until finally the only way for you to find what worked for you was to first start experimenting, in college, yes, and then ultimately to leave.
Exactly. And that's exactly what they don't want to happen, right? And that's why they, at the time, were discouraging higher education, because they don't want you to be influenced by any questions, and it's really funny because now I'm even going back further. My high school teacher, I remember him, this lovely man that just kind of took a bunch of my friends and I under his wing in a way. And one time I remember a parent teacher night, I saw him trying to get my parents to acknowledge how brilliant I was and that she should do this. It would be great if she did that. And, I remember that conversation because I was like, wow, this is advocacy happening here in front of me. And then he and I were having a conversation one day, and he said, I have a relative that went to Africa, was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, went to Africa as a missionary and was down there bothering the natives. And I remember him using that word. And I thought, yeah, he's not into this at all. And there was myself and another student, another boy that was a witness, the two of us. And he had a thing going on with us. He used to, give us marks within 1 point of each other and had us really competing. And the thing about witness kids is that they are really bright before they even get to school because of the way that they're trained at home. There's a lot of reading and a lot of analysis going on in the direction they want you to do it in. And then there's a lot of verbal presentation, and there's a lot of off the cuff impromptu commenting, and you're knocking on doors since you're 8 years old, and you're on stage since you're 8 years old, So in school, that is going to shine. Right?
Yeah.
So, please.
I was just going to say it's fascinating, and I don't personally know much about the Jehovah's Witness faith, and so I'm learning a lot about this, right? I'm going to be neutral here, but it's fascinating some of the things that you've shared, right? Being raised to not be curious. And now here you are. That is literally the first word you use to describe yourself. Being taught not to, these are my words, not yours, but being taught not to be too smart and yet being taught, right? So there's just so many interesting dynamics at play here that within the context of the container that doesn't feel right to you, there's still all of this development happening for you and by you that I just have to acknowledge that. I'm not sure really where I'm going with that.
No, you're going exactly where you're supposed to go, because as a human design projector, I don't always see myself. I'm really much better at seeing other people. I hardly ever know what I want to do or what direction I want to go in, right? So when people actually reflect back to me what they're seeing and hearing, it is of such value to me. You have no idea. So I really appreciate you doing that, because those are some things that I hadn't thought of, even from my own story.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, I would just add, it kind of also paints a picture for all of us that we don't necessarily have to see what we're doing to acknowledge the fact or to recognize in hindsight that we're still doing. So there's just so many layers to your story, right? Like there was a deep inner knowing that guided
Yeah.
you. There was the environment around you that you were very observant of. There were many skills, and we haven't even gone past college, right? But there were many skills within your experience, however you felt about them, good, bad, right or wrong, positive, negative, whatever, that ultimately contributed to your story. And you were moving. Like what I see so far in your story is there was a strong sense of knowing and a strong desire to know. And like the one thing that I see very clearly is like you were going to get the answers you needed to get one way or another.
Yeah, didn't know it at the time, but yes.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It was there whether you saw it or not.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back real quick on that teacher and what he did for me in the
Please.
story, because I was telling you that he was kind of pitting my classmate and I against each other in a way, and I've without telling lots of details about it, his whole focus was to kind of push us towards more without saying, defy your religion, do this, do that. He never said that. He just gave us, he's brilliant himself in the way that he did it, was like, reach for more, reach for more. You guys have something going on, you know? So the other kid that I'm talking about, he literally rebelled at 16 and he left home at 16 and went through a lot and he became an ER doctor and he's just living this life of absolute nonconformity in many ways, you know.
Wow.
So we all have taken our different paths, but that's what they were squelching and he was not having it as best as he could. That his name is Mr. Oakley and I will forever be grateful for that. So
wonderful.
sorry about that. I threw us
Wonderful.
off, but I wanted to go back.
No, you didn't. That's your story. That's what we're here for. So I'm glad you brought us back to that. And let's take that into question two. And a lot of times the story will go back and forth between question one and two. So by all means, you kind of already shared some of this, but expand on this if it feels right. The next question is, what did this create for you? So as you look back at this comma you were sitting on and this kind of transition out of the one life and identity into what came next, what was going on for you? What did this create?
Oh, it created, I mean, on one hand, it was just, wow, the world looks so brilliant and exciting. And I'm, you know, happy to be here, out here. And at the same time, I started to realize, wow, that means that I'm going to lose everyone. So it was like the wow, look at me now did not last that long because it was, wow, I don't have any support. Because their belief is once you do anything like what I did, right? They can't associate with you. They can't be the same as they were with you before. And because you are going to cause them to think and you are going to lure them away. So that's the other thing you learn growing up, that if someone leaves the faith, you literally shut it down. And that was another thing that from the age of 8 all the way through, I saw that treatment of people and it really hurt me to the core. That's the sensitive part of me, is like, there's something seriously wrong with that. But I didn't calculate that for myself at all because they didn't kick me out. And that's usually how they treat people when they disfellowship them or kick them out. But they still have a level of disassociating. So if I leave and don't keep up so to your question, it was basically like, wow, I'm in this by myself and I don't know what to do. I'm out in this world. It's like almost like I lived in a commune or on one of those bases for really radical faiths, right? And cults. And that was out here in the wild, like, you know, dropped off by the side of the road and not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the state of the union, to be funny. But that was the state of me at the time, was like, okay, wow, I don't even know what to do with myself.
And that had to be difficult because, as you kind of touched on, it sounds like had you been kicked out, to use those words, right, then perhaps you could have been fueled by a little bit of anger, you know, and that bucket of emotions that come with that. But this is a choice you made. and a consequence you didn't anticipate. And so not only are you physically out here,
Mm-hmm.
also emotionally, like, what am I supposed to feel in addition
Exactly.
to the things that you've already described?
Exactly. Feelings, what are those? We weren't really kind of taught to have those either. Like, you don't get, what are you feeling? Yeah, that's not the one. This is the one.
Yeah.
So not even really being able to identify and make sense of what you're feeling out there.
So how did you navigate? You brought us to this point. I can physically see you college. Now I've walked out. Now I'm in the big wide world, and the doors closed behind me, and I'm feeling and carrying these really heavy things. What happened next?
Oh, wow. Wow. That's that. Basically, I just kind of crashed. Well, let's see. I had received a nursing degree, right? So I was a nurse at that time and able to do travel nursing. And one of my assignments brought me to California. And that's really where I kind of settled into a bunch of contracts here in California.
Mhm.
So I could set down a little bit of some roots, basically. And I thought, okay, now what? Because my whole world was find a kingdom hall where Jehovah's Witnesses meet and dive into that community. And that would have taken care of everything. And I literally did try that for a minute. I thought,
Mm.
okay, let me see if I can do my scam job here where I'm in and not really in. And I went, and sure enough, they took me in and went, invited me around and so forth. And I thought, I cannot, and then someone became interested in me as in a romantic way. And I was like, I can't even, this is not right. I can't do this to this person. I can't live this
Mm.
life of fakeness. So I absolutely left, but I didn't know what to do with myself. So just different people came into my life and introduced different ways of living, like their lifestyle. So it was just getting to know. Again, I'm glad, I'm curious, because sort of watching other people, how they lived, and I have an interesting quality of being able to imitate people really easily too. So I can kind of fit in.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, and then I took a job that burned me all the way out. I worked at UCLA as an ICU nurse, and then they flipped me into night shift, and I got really, really like physically drained. But I think it was coming. It was
Mm.
like emotionally drained, mentally drained, physically drained, and then no support. So it's like I didn't have any friends or family to say, this is a challenge and I need some support, right? I mean, my family was still there, but differently now. Um,
Mhm.
so I ended up really sick, and one of my doctors took me off work and then said, "Hey, you know what? I don't know what's going on with you. Maybe you just need to talk to someone." So, and I was like, "Yeah, I don't need it," because again, you're kind of taught that if you talk to a therapist or someone, they're gonna lead you astray. They're gonna,
Mm.
So I in many ways, I was already a therapist for other people, so I really wasn't afraid of it per se. So I went, and I was so fortunate. The first person that called me back was the one. It was just a perfect match in heaven. And she really, really helped me put a lot of things into perspective and find my own emotions. Like I just didn't know what to feel about a lot of things. And she would just,
Mhm.
label some things and be curious about and say things to me like, that's not normal, don't you? Like things that you grow up thinking are normal. And I'm like, I always thought it wasn't, but now that you put it that way. So I went through, many years of therapy, and she became like the second mom in a way. Like she didn't never broke her professional boundaries, but definitely did what therapists are supposed to do, hold that space for
Mhm.
you and be what you need. Right. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, through her, I actually got back on the education thing, and I got my BA, and then I got my master's in psychology. And then I started learning how to be a therapist myself, because she was like, you actually do have those natural skills and you have all that training, the chatterbox that you are. You have the ability to talk to people. So I wonder if you want to like experiment with that, basically. And it's funny that she actually used that word. So I did that. And then still I was like, okay, this is great, but I feel like I don't have a direction. And one of my nursing clients introduced me to human design, and she was like, "Have you ever heard of this thing?" And when the minute she told me I was what human design type I was and what that would meant, oh my God, it felt like this boulder I'd been carrying around on my back or just fell off, like weights just fell off. It gave me so much permission to be myself. And it literally gave me a core identity, a core to
Mm.
start with that wasn't um, prescribed to me as intimidating or scary or stay away from that or any like I got to see who I was and I was like, that is cool. And nobody is telling
Mm.
me not to or trying to steer me away from it, which is what that always was happening, you know? So human design, I think, was like the system that I needed to kind of help me come back to what my true identity was from a birth, what I'd always been fighting for and not
Mm.
realizing. It was like, I remember even using words like, could you just leave me alone to make a mistake or leave me alone to just think for myself, you know? So
Yeah.
I was always fighting for that. Um, so that's probably just, the path that I can see. Those are like the big steps that I can kind of see to where I am now.
It's a big journey. I mean, no simplification of it. I mean, that's a big journey and a lot of experiences. And what I see and what you've shared is this life of not necessarily knowing the identity or being aware of knowing the identity, but knowing for sure it's not what everybody's telling me. And then when you come to human design, sure, we could say in a way that's also somebody telling you, but back to your gut, like you knew this to be right.
Yeah,
So shifting
totally.
away from, like you said, the prescriptive or being told or the restrictive to, I've got to be curious. I'm going to do all these things to help me. And then this it does all of these things that you just described. What really stuck with me specifically was the lifting of the weight and this freedom. And like you said, the permission and the identity.
Mm,
How amazing that must have been for you.
absolutely. I mean, looking back, I can really see, the path and going, wow, that's a lot. That was a lot. And you actually survived. Like I remember my therapist saying to me, a decade or two ago, saying, it's amazing that you're as high functioning as you are with all you've been through. Never forgotten her saying that. And I was like, I mean, if I can
Mm.
quote her verbatim, it's like, really?
Hmm.
And she's like, dude, you don't understand. That's like some serious stuff to survive and pull yourself out of it. And I've never looked at
Yeah.
it that way. So again, it's that reflection that a lot of us need and we don't get. We don't get to experience our beauty because we are so good at seeing it in other people and we're so good at reflecting it for them. And then we're like sad because, well, how about me? Sometimes is the wine, right?
Yeah.
But it's almost like my whole way, who I am really is as a reflection of it. Like I'm here to reflect that for other people, and that's always what I've been doing, like helping out everybody, like to keeping them safe, and all that.
Hmm.
And then one day I was like, and who's doing that for me exactly? And really,
Yeah. Well, even earlier in your story, right? I acknowledge like the person teaching rebellion still stands in the conformity space, but those words aside, right? Like
yeah,
you what I really appreciate about your story and what really resonates with me is regardless of the search or the seeking, the you that is you always was there. And in your story, we can go back and retrace and say, yeah, that part that knows who you are always knew. And even though you had to bob and weave and take the curvy road, like the straight thread that runs through that road was always these core elements, helping
yeah,
others, being curious, questioning or challenging the status quo, and seeking something clearer for yourself.
Yeah, all of that. See what I'm saying? You're just so good at that. The reflecting back, I'm like, yeah, all of that.
It's a skill I think we can all benefit from because we live in a world that tells us always to look for more, look for new, look for different. And we don't really acknowledge and reflect on, as you have done for us, what already is and what already is amazing.
Yeah.
So back to you then for the third question is looking at what you've shared with us so far. And I know it's just a small snapshot of your life, but what have you learned about yourself as a result of sitting on this comma and the journey that unfolded?
I I honestly I'm so proud of myself is what I would say. I'm really proud of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um one of the words I used to describe myself earlier on was I'm determined. I had no idea I was a determined person because, over the years of going through this, I was constantly burning out and constantly having to, take a leave or take time off or and recover and all that. And I'm still to some degree, fried from that because I forgot to mention that I took on this assignment as one of Jehovah's Witnesses where I would knock on doors 100 hours a month
Mm,
and work and go to school and not have a car in Toronto all year long in the winter and all that. And did that for about 5 years. And I'm thinking that, and then I burned out pretty badly right
wow.
around then. I couldn't get out of bed for a year pretty much. And they did all the tests and couldn't find out what was wrong with me. And, she has mono, maybe she has this, no, it was just
Wow.
exhaustion, So, and I've done that a few times since then. So that was the other beauty of finding human design. It was like, well, you are this and you're not designed to work like that. So let's adjust that, right? So when I fast forward now, what have I learned? What do I believe about myself? How would I describe myself even now? I would just say I'm just really I'm not going to give in to death that easily. I'm like, oh, hell no. I am a survivor. I am determined. I got skills. I'll figure it out. You know, the universe will send someone something, and it's always the perfect someone, it and thing. That's, just constantly being surprised. Like I was saying, surprise is something I didn't realize. Ooh, surprise me. And I'm surprised by how I always get what I need, you know?
Nice. I love that too because you're kind of illustrating your body will tell you what's right for you, right? Because
Mhm.
everything's got different ways you can look at it or reframe it, right? And you can be exhausted from doing a lot of or too much of a thing that you love, and you can be exhausted from doing little to nothing of a thing that you hate, and doing a lot of a thing that you hate can lead to some serious consequences, right? But the body will tell us, and
Yeah.
and so I think that's an important thing that I'm taking from your story is because I will push through some physical feelings, sensations, pain, right? Because I grew up in that hole. You suck it up, get over it. Don't be a insert vulgar word. And so I'll push through some stuff, even when my body is like, stop. But when you go past, when you ignore your body's message and move forward, then your body is going to say, okay, you're on your own, right? So,
This is true. Your body will stop you eventually.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's trying to survive,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? It needs to survive. So it's like to hell with your feelings. We need to rest.
And the other thing that you shared that I heard is, and the thing in your story for you is that, and the thing that is right for me and that is going to serve me and take care of me isn't something I can predict, plan, or prescribe.
Exactly. It's trust. It's a lot of trust that I learned,
That's wonderful.
that the universe is not conspiring against you. You are. You put the roadblocks in and you have things to learn. And,
Mm.
there's just you being still and trusting that it's a very specific type of stillness that you have to experience to kind of understand it. And I think I experienced it when I tried meditation and I stuck to it for a really long time. And then I remember one day coming home from work and opening the door to my apartment, and my apartment had that weird feeling of when you walk into a holy place or a cathedral, a really old church. And, there's this feeling that you maybe not, I can't find the words to describe it, but it just felt like I walked into peace and stillness when I opened the door. And I thought, oh my God, if I could just bottle this. But it was, I think, the energy I brought into my home because I was practicing the stillness and I had achieved glimpses of that sort of no mind space. Yeah. If you've ever experienced it, it's just like this really cool feeling that I was taught to be afraid of because you're just letting the devil come into that space. But it really was like, I want more of that. And that's a stillness I try to teach people that I work with. And when you're in that space, you just are allowing. There's nothing for you to do. There's no efforting.
And it also sounds like, let me phrase this a different way. For a lot of people, and myself included, will be like, I don't know what I want. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm really clear on where I'm walking away from, right? And in coaching, we will try to facilitate the process of, if you're walking away from, then what are you walking towards? And a lot of times that's difficult for people because we're still using capitalistic terms, right? But what I'm hearing you describe is I'm walking away from all of that doubt, questioning, and restrictive towards what was clear to you is what you needed most was peace, not what's the job that comes after that. What's the, who do I become? Or, what's the next hobby or pursuit? Peace was the destination you were looking for. And
peace and quiet.
More than good enough.
Yeah. I think that's really accurate. So if I was moving from looking for a new job, it was all about, okay, I don't want anybody who's going to mess with my peace. Right? So peace, quiet, stillness. What kind of schedule do I need? What kind of clients do I need? What kind of drive do I want? I don't want to be on the freeway driving. I don't want to, I am a daydreamer, so I will run off the road. I don't want to go through the canyons for work, So you start sort of planning your life around maintaining that thing that you experienced that felt so good. I want more of that. So if I let that in, I'm going to mess with the peace. So I can't let that in. And being very, very determined about sticking to your guns that way and not being talked out of anything. I think that was another thing I was running away from is stop talking me out of everything. I'd really like to think my own thoughts for a minute. Literally, if you see my hands up, it was like, can I think? Can you let me live? And when you get that opportunity, it's like, ooh. And it was fun because I went to the artist way. That was another thing that happened. That was a pretty big milestone. And in that course, we did an exercise, or I don't know what we were doing, but it was something that stuck with me. You have the right to, what was the word that we used? But not plan. But you had control over your life. It'll come to me in a minute what the word was, but you get to design the life you want. You get to say what it is. It is not, happiness is not having a prescription to follow. So I learned that I had the right to actually deliberately design. That was the word, deliberately design my own life. So that's when I was like, okay, no more of this 12-hour shift thing. That's killing me. So what else is out there? So looking for nursing jobs and just gradually designing how I wanted to work, what time I wanted to go to work and all of that. And that I didn't know I had a right to.
I love that. And it's powerful. And, I could even challenge and say, you may not have known it, but you were still always pursuing that, right? Like,
yes,
in a way, in little ways, and in little ways that maybe didn't necessarily, weren't as clear that they were part of the bigger goal, but it was another piece that came into place that also gave the language for what you were kind of already doing, right? So when you look at this and everything that you've shared, what the fourth question is, what's changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma? So maybe kind of in a simpler way, what would you say are the most significant things that changed for you as a result of this?
I would say the most significant behavioral change for me is just being really confident about what I want and what I don't want. I think when you're constantly talked in and out of things, you don't know who you are. Like, they don't give you the space for that. So for me, that's significant. Like being able, like, going through therapy and, being in that vulnerable space and being brought to a space of more strength and power to one day I was actually able to say to my therapist, okay, when you said that, okay, that did not feel good. And that reminded me of this and this and this. I didn't know I had the right to speak. I could do that. And this woman that I'd come to love,
Oh.
I was actually talking back to her because that's what she wanted me to be able to do. And she created the space. She never said, I want you to be able to tell me off one day. She never said that. She just literally created this new parenting kind of experience that you can do that. You have that freedom. So I've kind of run with that. And I think being able to say to someone, no, I can't do that because of this, or I'd rather do this, or yeah, I can totally do that. And be able to, it doesn't matter what they do or say, to know that I still have control is like a huge shift.
If I may, I'd love to even add what I'm seeing is that your ability to take command has brought you into so much bigger of a life.
I'd say, because then there's the no fear now, right? I'm in control. I'm the one. I know. Yeah, just give me all the information and I will, make a decision. And it's always, like you said, what I've always wanted. Just give me the info. And I literally am smart enough. There's something that guides me. My intuition is like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And allow me. And that is an incredible amount of command and control and power that we're not taught to have when you grow up in an environment like that, right? So that is significant.
It strikes me too that as we look at the world that we live in today, and it's not just today, right? But I'll acknowledge today's world, right?
Yeah.
You lived in a microcosm that really exposed you in a very concentrated way to what the bigger world is also like.
Say more about that.
Being told what to think, don't challenge, don't get too smart, do things the way we tell you to do things. It sounds like it was very overt and direct and literal in your upbringing. And now here we are living in a bigger world where maybe it's not quite so small of a container. It's not quite so obvious to all, but those elements are very much at play in the world that we live in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly. So, I work with people who don't have my background, but they do feel those constraints. Mm-hmm. And when they are introduced to the work that I do, it's literally just a key. It's just a key to open the door to this is who you are. You can do whatever you want with that. It's because even when I was introduced to human design, I was like very wary of it because I just came out of a controlling environment and here I am attracted to this thing, but it came with people and stuff. And I was like, oh no, I feel like a babe in the woods. Am I about to do it again? So I was scared, but I was also desperate. Okay. So the desperation made me keep going, but with eyes wide open because I knew where I'd come from. Yeah. Right. And I knew I could trust myself. Somewhere in there, I knew I could trust myself. And I did. I learned as much as I could about human design in over a 2-year period, like studied and taught people right away because that was the best way to learn. And then when it started to feel uncomfortable, I left and I didn't go back to it for 10 years. I went back to the community and I thought, what's going on over here? And then I was like, yeah, that experiment's over. This piece is over for me. I don't need this piece. It still doesn't feel good. And it's just so funny that so that was 2018. So just yesterday, somebody was telling me, yeah, I'm going to kind of move away from that community too. It's kind of got this cult-like feeling to it. And I was like,
Mm.
ta-da! So I wasn't wrong. My vibes were never
Right.
wrong. So I say this to just in case any other witnesses are listening to it, because I know that even though we leave, we still come out with fear. And human design is such a huge key to the other side. Like it's a quick key to
Mm.
getting to know yourself, that many of them have a block around it because they're afraid it's another, controlling mind
Sure.
thing.
Well, and like you've said, right, you identified like there was an attraction. You've been very clear on the where in your life there's the resistance to, and then where in your life there's the attraction to, and there was an attraction. And yet the difference that I've heard you describe is that these are tools, this is information, and you get the permission to use it however you choose versus
Yes,
it being prescriptive and nope, this is the only way to interpret it, and so on and so forth. That seems like such an
exactly.
important distinction.
Yeah. And the trusting of the intuition, because we are conditioned away from that. Like, don't trust yourself, trust me. It is what
Mm-hmm.
I say it is. And especially if you're, a couple generations in, like your family's been Job's Witnesses for 4 generations, there's only that groupthink, right? So, and if you're
Mm-hmm.
born into it, so you know nothing else. So who do you trust? And so forth. You got to get out of there, but who do you trust and where do you go? And can I even trust myself? I don't even know who I am.
I'm curious, and I'm going to ask the question here for a reason, but you and I can explore it offline. We're not going to have time to do it, but I'm curious for you. We've talked about your experience and we've talked about trusting yourself and the intuition and how you've been able to break away from something that didn't fit for you. And I'm curious about the people who choose to stay and what their experience is like. And so offline, I would love to find out what, if anything, you've learned about that. The reason I chose to leave that in here is because it's easy for us to get in our own story and our own journey and think about, okay, this is what worked for me and so forth, and then start to go. I'm not saying this is what you did. I'm self-referencing here, and then start to go down the path. Well, sucks to be the people who chose to stay. I insert this and leave it here because it is another point of being curious, right? We can
Right.
have whatever we believe and want to believe and opinions and so on and worldviews and values about it. But it is also okay to be curious about why someone else made another choice. So you just opened up a whole door for me to be like, we've gotten a little story, a little bit of Brigitte's experience from somebody who chose to leave a container. And what must it be like for people who choose to stay in a container? Whole other topic of conversation.
Yeah.
I want to go to question 5. I'm not even going to give you a chance to respond to that. Go to question 5, and then we're going to start to close.
That's
I'm going to
so
reserve.
unfair.
I'm going to
I'm
reserve that
chomping
just
at
for
the
me.
bit.
That's going to be offline. That's going to be hours offline. Question 5, kind of your gut reaction and response. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
Oh, let's see. Am I on another comma? Well, let's see. Right now, I'm excited about jumping into a new phase of my coaching practice, right? So I went from being a therapist to a human design coach. And now I'm thinking about not just coaching people, with just their everyday challenges or whatever. I'm looking forward to educating therapists and coaches and helpers of all sorts to use human design as a reference when they're working with their clients.
Mm.
They don't have to be me. They
Right.
don't have to, just to use it to understand your client better. Use it to assess your client faster. Use it to be able to speak their language quicker. And
Mm.
actually, when I learned human design, I started this little coaching business called Crispy Fried Nurses. And I started using it with some of my nursing colleagues, and then I realized they had deeper problems that I wasn't equipped to
Mm.
handle. So I stopped doing it because I thought, no, I'm just going to do more damage. I don't know what I'm doing. So, but I do see a lot of therapists refer their clients to me because they don't know
Okay.
human design, right? But their clients do, and their clients are asking them, "Do you know human design by any chance?" And I'm like, "What? There's a need." So,
Yeah.
yes,
Well, and what I love about that is it's allowing yourself to start something new, and also taking your experience and being able to teach and help and bring others along
yeah.
is really kind of what you're taking
Well, I think,
from your
yeah,
experience.
I didn't know I was going to be sitting on a comma with that big thing back in the day. I don't know if I know when I'm sitting on a comma. I just know that my life is very much about trying new things and experimenting and going in different directions and just having fun in the adventure, even if it doesn't work out. It's an adventure. It seems like
Sure.
that's my life. Um, so yeah, maybe I'm just bouncing from comma to comma, and I just know how to do it a little, less less painfully and less stressfully, and just have fun now.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing you say is, I learned from each one, and that's the thing about this comma metaphor, right? Like you can have multiple commas in a sentence, a paragraph, a page, or a whole story,
Yeah,
right? The story is full of commas, and so it's not a period. The periods have their
right.
place, but the commas are part of the story and part of
Exactly.
life. I love this. I love every part of the story. Brigitte, what would you acknowledge yourself for as you look back over the course of our conversation? What would you like to acknowledge?
I would like to acknowledge the fact that I even told you that story about me leaving. I don't think I've ever really spoken about it in this depth before.
Mm.
I want to say, I wonder if this is another comma because it's been the last couple of months, maybe this last year, that I've even kind of casually mentioned it to people and and through that met other people who have left, like Mormons. I have some clients now that have
Mm.
left Mormonism, that faith of Latter-day Saints, and I feel like this. I didn't really know I was going to tell this story, but when I said, "Well, what do you mean by off the comma?" and you explained it to me, I was like, "Oh, I got one."
Mm. Back to that
And
deep inner knowing.
right, and it was like,
Yeah.
"This is the time. I think this is the time," and I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth at all. I just know that something else is brewing. Something needs to be told.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
yeah,
I want to acknowledge you for that, because that had to have taken a lot of courage, and this is deeply personal for you. And there's so many things that you share that are courageous and vulnerable, and this is what I love about you sharing that, because it's going to reach a lot of different ears in a lot of different ways. There might be people who are going to be able to relate to the specific subject matter. I have the same type of issue with the same type of circumstance, right? And yet there's a lot of people who are going to look at it and say, well, I don't have a faith. It's not a church for me, but it's a this. It might be a relationship, or it might be an institution, or it might be a family dynamic. So your story is powerful in its rawest context, and yet it is so portable for people. So thank you for bringing that and sharing with us and allowing yourself to be
welcome.
surprised in telling that story.
Right? I am surprised.
Yeah. As we wrap up, just a couple of things here. So first thing, we'll put the info in the show notes, but how can people get in touch with you? Where can people find you?
The easiest and fastest way is my website, brigittenight.com. I also have a thriving Facebook group called Human Design in Action. I think those are probably the fastest ways these days.
Okay, wonderful. And we'll also put your YouTube up there as well. Is that
Oh,
okay?
yes, yes, my little growing YouTube channel. Yes, I'm having fun with that. Thank you, Paul. It's Human Design in Action on YouTube.
Wonderful. So folks who are just joining now will be able to get to see where this grows.
Yes.
Brigitte, there's one other thing that's really important for me as part of this podcast, because I do believe in the importance of everybody's stories, and also the people in our lives are an important part of that story. So I do this thing called acknowledgments, where if you look at your life and your story, it's an opportunity for you to lift, promote, boost people, causes, creators that matter to you, that might not otherwise get that voice, or maybe that other people need to hear about. So as you look at kind of your life and your story, who might you acknowledge and share. And we'll put that information in the show notes.
So many people. I just want to shout out my Mr. Oakley teacher, and I want to shout out my therapist, Jane Emmer. If she's still practicing, check her out. But the person that I think really had an impact on me in the last year and a half, is Marla McAlpine. She goes by Marla Mac online. And she's an online friend. I've never met her in person. But what I really appreciate that she did for me was, again, like, I'm usually helping people. They don't usually see me. And I had been complaining, or people had wanted me to start doing video, do more lives. And I was like deathly afraid of it, just for my own perfectionism reasons, right? Deathly afraid of it. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it if someone comes on with me. I'll do it if someone comes with me. And again, people are like, that is so weird. You don't need anybody to come on with you. And nobody would bite. And I was like, okay, so years went by again, and never did it. And then I just kept putting it out there. I would love it if. And one day, Marla just asked me, hey, do you want to come on this panel about projectors? And we did that. And that was kind of fun. And then it was like, we had such great chemistry on camera. And then she was like, hey, do you want to come on and let's talk about this thing? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. So we did it. And then I arranged my own little meeting, and I said, can you just be there? And she came. And it was like, I was off to the races after that. I knew what I needed, but nobody believed me because my outward persona is, I don't need any help, apparently. And when I ask for it, apparently I'm lying. So when somebody sees that and steps into it, I'm just always chuffed. I'm like, what? And so I want to say, thank Marla so much for that. She is probably nothing to her, right? But I just want to thank her for that, because it meant so much to me to get that leg up.
Well, and you're also demonstrating a point in that story too that I think is so important. It's like other people will tell you what you need, but they're really just reflecting what they need you for you to do, right? But you know what you need. Yeah. Yes. Right? For you, I may be able to get out here and do this all by myself, but I'm telling you right now, for me, I need a blanket or a safety net, or, somebody smiling at me or whatever. So yeah, there is a difference.
All of that. It's so true. Yes. Thank you for emphasizing that.
Yeah. Because I can relate.
Believe people when they talking to you, right?
Yes, right. And be mindful of what you're telling and offering other people, right? You and I had a conversation about that earlier, right? So
true.
Wonderful acknowledgments. Thank you so much for being on the show and being this episode story and sharing all of this really wonderful and just so insightful and like inspirational parts of your story that have been very personal for you. So thank you. I'm looking forward to the ongoing conversation. And definitely, if anybody heard this term human design and heard some of the things that you were talking about and was curious, look into it, right? We're not telling you to do anything. If you're curious, go check it out. If it speaks to you, explore it. If it doesn't speak to you, don't. And Brigitte is a great source to reach out to begin that exploration.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish the people could see us smiling, how much we're smiling at each
other,
know, right?
I love it, right? At some point, we will introduce the visual element in, and I'll save these recordings. I tried it once and something didn't feel right. So we will fix that in the future. But have a wonderful weekend to you, Brigitte, and everybody else. And we will see you all on the next episode. What an honor it is to witness these stories from these amazing human beings, and today's guest was no exception. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. I can't tell you how magical it can be to set aside your expectations and just let your thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper.
You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to do anything with it, but you can be amazed at what comes out of your thoughts and onto paper and what that can do for you. I know freestyle journaling has been a powerful practice in my life for a very long time. You just never know what you might discover about yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. Follow me on social media at Off the Comma, and also look for upcoming workshops and events at offthecomma.com, or better yet, go to offthecomma.com and sign up for my mailing list and let me bring the news directly to you. I am passionate about keeping this podcast ad-free so that we create a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories uninterrupted by commercials and promotions. I currently cover all the production costs, and I'm happy to continue doing so. And I'm also open to and appreciative of any donations that anyone would like to contribute. This is nothing more than to be able to support the podcast and cover some of the monthly editing and producing and equipment costs that are associated with this podcast. So look for the donations link in the podcast descriptions wherever you find this podcast. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast, and more importantly, spread the good word. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. As always, keep noticing.